From high IQ to hemorrhagic stroke, a lifelong journey of discipline, insight, and vulnerability. Number 1323, August 4, 2025. EclaireMD Foundation. Gerald C. Shu. Category: Stroke, Medicine, and Psychology. High IQ and a lifelong pursuit of meaningful work. In 1972, at the age of 25, I underwent an IQ test at MIT. The examiner informed me that my score exceeded 150, placing me in the so-called genius level. While I appreciated the implication of high cognitive ability, I made a self-conscious decision at that moment: I would never rely solely on my IQ. Instead, I committed to relentless hard work, lifelong learning, and meaningful contributions to society. To date, I have spent a total of 43 years in academic and intellectual training, 18 years in 7 formal institutions and across 9 disciplines, colleges and universities, and 25 years of self-directed study without classrooms, classmates, professors, textbooks, exams, or degrees. These areas include mathematics, physics, engineering, computer science, artificial intelligence, internal medicine, endocrinology, food nutrition, psychology, statistics, and biomedical systems modeling. This broad background enabled me to work across multiple complex fields, from traditional engineering design, Wall Street finance, Silicon Valley, competition to electronics and various AI applications, and finally into personalized medicine and public health. In giving back to society, I have supported more than 10,000 underprivileged children in pursuing college education, and over a 9-year period, I provided psychotherapy support to more than 250 psychologically traumatized orphans and abused women. IQ in context: rare but not sufficient. Statistically, an IQ above 150 occurs in roughly 1 in 2,000 people, placing me in the top 0.05% of the population. However, IQ merely signals intellectual potential. Without discipline, post-academic effort, and emotional control, intelligence alone can be a liability rather than a strength. For example, my post-high school workload averaged 120 hours per week as a graduate student at MIT, 130 hours per week as an entrepreneur, including 7 failed startups, and later as one of the top CEO in the semiconductor IC industry, 90 hours per week over the past 16 years, post-retirement as a solo medical researcher, without facilities, labs, assistants, or collaborators. This extraordinary effort transformed my potential into real-world outcomes. In 1995, I became the most accomplished Asian American CEO on Wall Street. In AI, I developed AI algorithmic frameworks for global chip design. In 1981, I built the world's first briefcase-sized portable personal computer. In 1983, I collaborated with a linguistics professor at Stanford to prototype an early AI product conceptually similar to today's ChatGPT. These early attempts failed, but they remain among my most treasured intellectual and entrepreneurial accomplishments. After retiring in 2010, I turned to internal medicine, not as a physician or clinician, but as a medical researcher trying to save my own life. I had no medical background and began from scratch. Since then, I have read more than 8,000 published medical papers and also written over 1,300 single-author medical research papers covering diabetes, cancers, cardiovascular disease, diabetic neuropathy, kidney failure, and stroke. My work is powered by 4 million self-collected health data points, stored on a proprietary AI medical system I developed on my iPhone, and a unique medical research methodology I created in 2021, the viscoplastic energy model, VMT, which is rooted in Isaac Newton's 1687 discovery of linear, viscous flow and further inspired by my MIT advisor, Professor Norman Jones, who applied viscoplasticity to solid mechanics in 1965. A stroke from both biology and psychology, a rare self-reflection and self-diagnosis. On June 21, 2025, I suffered a hemorrhagic stroke in the pons area, near the back of my brain. What made this case unique was not just the clinical event itself, but my ability to conduct a reasonably accurate self-reflection and self-diagnosis of its cause, made possible by my VMT medical research model, 15 years of longitudinal health data, and my deep, self-directed study of both psychology and pathophysiology. According to my analysis, 53% of my stroke's root cause came from chronically elevated pulse pressure, PP, due to vascular stiffness from aging, 38 in 2018 to 50 in 2025. 47% came from an acute, emotionally induced hypertensive spike on June 21, 2025, unrelated to chronic hypertension. My blood pressure rose sharply to 175 mm of mercury at the time of admission. What triggered this spike? The hidden psychological trigger, real estate stress, and emotional vulnerability. The immediate cause of my stroke was not purely biological, such as disease or diet, it was psychological. At the time, I was deeply involved in several high-stakes real estate transactions in certain parts of the United States. During this process, I encountered a small and isolated number of real estate professionals whose approaches, while perhaps standard in some markets, still triggered significant emotional stress for me. In my personal experience over the years, I observed what felt like a recurring pattern in a few of these transactions. An initial promise of a high listing price to win the seller's agreement, strong encouragement to spend heavily on cosmetic upgrades or remodeling to enhance buyer appeal. If the property does not sell after several months, a sudden recommendation for a steep price reduction, sometimes in the range of hundreds of thousands of dollars, while the agent's commission is only modestly adjusted. This pattern, although possibly common in fast-moving or luxury markets, can be emotionally destabilizing for some sellers, especially those unfamiliar with industry norms or lacking prior real estate experience. From my limited and personal perspective, these experiences highlighted a potential mismatch between certain business practices and the emotional well-being of clients. I do not intend to generalize or criticize the real estate profession as a whole. Many agents are dedicated, honest, and highly client-focused. Rather, some of the practices I personally encountered felt more oriented toward transactional efficiency than toward long-term trust or client empathy. As someone with a strong sense of fairness and ethical sensitivity, I found these interactions deeply uncomfortable. In hindsight, I now believe that my acute emotional response, combined with age-related vascular stiffness, contributed to a sudden spike in blood pressure, ultimately triggering my stroke. This reflection is not meant as a condemnation of the real estate industry. Instead, it serves as a cautionary note about the emotional and physical toll that high-value, high-pressure situations can have, especially for older adults or individuals with underlying health conditions. The double-edged sword of high IQ and emotional reactivity. Here lies one of my deepest personal flaws. I possess strong cognitive acuity and advanced pattern recognition, which allowed me to detect their manipulative tactics and behavior patterns instantly. In plain English terms, their actions felt like an insult to my intelligence. At the same time, I have a very low tolerance for unethical behavior, and a quick emotional reaction to injustice. By nature, I am impatient and prone to a hot, short temper, especially when confronted with dishonesty or unfair exploitation. That emotional surge triggered a dangerous cascade. My anger spiked rapidly, my blood pressure surged uncontrollably, my already fragile cerebral vessels ruptured, and I suffered a hemorrhagic stroke. It wasn't just a stroke caused by aging or biology, it was a collapse of biopsychosocial balance, and the only reason I was able to fully understand this event was because I knew my own personality profile, the psychological behavior patterns of the individuals I was dealing with, and how aging and stiffened blood vessels, as reflected in pulse pressure, interact with the brain's nervous system. Knowledge gained through 16 years of dedicated biomedical self-study. What most doctors miss. How many traditionally trained MDs would evaluate a stroke by considering both vascular strain and psychological triggers, especially in a patient who appears physically fit, intellectually strong, and disciplined? Very few. Modern medicine still treats the mind and body as separate systems, despite clear evidence of their interconnectedness. Emotional trauma such as betrayal, manipulation, or injustice is not merely subjective discomfort, it is a biochemical event that can trigger vasoconstriction, elevate cortisol, and rupture weakened arteries. Patients capable of accurate self-diagnosis using integrative modeling and emotional awareness are rare, even among professionals. But it is this kind of whole system thinking that medicine desperately needs. Conclusion: intelligence alone is not enough. My IQ enabled me to master complexity, but it did not shield me from the consequences of being human. It may have helped me analyze, model, and innovate, but it also made me more sensitive to unethical behavior and emotionally reactive in moments of injustice. My stroke was not purely medical, it was the outcome of long-term physiological stress, from obesity, diabetes, and vascular aging, a short-term emotional insult, triggered by manipulation and ethical betrayal, and an unrestrained hypertensive surge, 175 millimeters of mercury. In other words, my high IQ and psychological triggers collided, causing a breakdown in an already strained vascular system. Recognizing both the pathophysiological and psychological roots of disease is essential, not just for my own recovery, but for shaping a more complete stroke care model for others. If my experience can serve as a case study, I hope it helps others, not only to recover from illness, but to understand themselves deeply, and to realize that healing begins with knowing your own system better than anyone else ever could. It is time for modern medicine to go beyond symptoms, numbers, and statistics, and begin addressing the dynamic energy exchange between the body, the mind, and the life story of every patient. I recognize that this is a difficult mission. Nevertheless, both in theory and in practice, this integrated and deeper mode of thinking is essential for advancing our understanding of a patient's overall well-being.